Not too long ago, in this great country of ours, citizens everywhere relied on small hometown newspapers to stay informed about current events, local high school sports scores, and that big upcoming sale at the local supermarket. It's true. Who made all this possible? Who labored 7 days a week, 365 days a year to make sure that the papers were delivered on time? The paperboy. That's right, the paperboy, an unsung hero of a bygone era in the days before people got their news, sports, and weather on their smartphones. I'm Pierce McManus. I was a paperboy, and this is my story. From 1983 to 1985, I faithfully delivered the Rockland Journal News to 54 houses in and around New City, New York. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with New City, it's a town approximately 20 miles north of New York City, and in the 1960s became home to countless cops, firemen, and school teachers who had grown up in New York, gotten married, and then headed north to claim their own piece of the American dream. A 3-bedroom colonial on a quiet street with a big backyard, perfect for summertime cookouts. My father was one of those New York City cops who found his own little slice of heaven in the suburbs. And each night, with the family safely nestled around the dinner table, he would entertain us with his gruesome tales of life on the beat and all the criminals he encountered on a daily basis. Would you believe I locked up a guy today who shot his own brother over the last piece of meatloaf? Meatloaf! Unbelievable! And as we listened to his terrifying tales of crime and punishment, we all agreed that moving to the suburbs was one of the best decisions my father ever had. But I quickly learned when I started my paper route at the tender age of 12 years old that you didn't need to be a New York City police officer to encounter scofflaws and criminals and dregs of society. Oh no, they were among us in the suburbs, and they were on my paper route. There was Mrs. Tricano, a 50-something chain-smoking spitfire of a woman who would wait for me at the end of her driveway, and very long driveway at that, every Monday. Why are there fewer and fewer coupons in my Sunday newspaper? She'd ask. If I don't start seeing more coupons, I'm going to call your boss. Was this woman seriously going to call my boss? I mean, I was gunning for newspaper carrier of the week, and one trumped-up coupon complaint, and I'd be done for. But beyond that, I resented the insinuation that I, the paper boy, would deny any of my customers the contents of their Sunday newspaper. I gathered my courage, I took a deep breath, and I said, Mrs. Tricano, I assure you, I will get to the bottom of this. Now, Mrs. Tricano was an annoyance, but there's a very special place in hell for the rogues known as Mr. and Mrs. Sunshine. That's right, Sunshine. Never was a last name more incorrectly bestowed upon a more undeserving couple. You see, the Sunshines had the habit of disappearing on those nights when I came by to collect for paper delivery. Finally, after 8 weeks of non-payment, I decided to make an unscheduled appearance to the Sunshine residence. Mr. Sunshine answered the door. 8 weeks? We would never let 8 weeks go by without paying you. I will pay you for 2 weeks. Was nothing sacred? Was this grown adult man going to shake down the paper boy? Well, apparently he was. I took his 2 weeks for paper money and biked home that night with a very, very bad taste in my mouth. There was Mrs. Tricano, there were the Sunshines, and then there was Billy Amsterdam. Billy Amsterdam was the neighborhood bully. He was a foot taller, 50 pounds heavier, and a year younger than me. Billy wanted my paper route, and he was going to make my life a living hell until he got it. Now, Billy applied all the usual stock and trade bullying tactics. There was the taunting, hey, Pierce, why don't you go pierce your ear, Pierce? There was the menacing, hey, Pierce, I'm going to kick your ass. And then there was the actual ass kicking. One night I was walking across Mrs. O'Shaughnessy's front yard when Billy tackled me from behind, and as the blows began to rain down from on high, a guardian angel in the form of Mrs. O'Shaughnessy stepped out onto her front porch. "Is that the McManus boy?" she shouted. "Yes," Billy responded. "Well, get off him, or I'm going to tell your mother." You see, the one thing that Billy feared in life was his mother. She was a tiny terror of a woman who never smiled and didn't speak so much as she barked at people. She struck fear in the heart of all her children and most of the neighborhood, for that matter. Billy was off of me in seconds and gone. With the threat of Billy's beatdowns looming during the weekdays, I preferred the peace and tranquility and safety of weekend paper delivery. You see, the Saturday and Sunday editions had to be in the mailboxes by 8 a.m., which meant I was up at the crack of dawn making the rounds while most of the neighborhood was still fast asleep. Or so I thought. I had just placed the Sunday paper in Mr. Wallace's mailbox when I saw the police car roll up. Police officer emerged from the squad car, eyeing me suspiciously, walking slowly towards me and reaching for his holster. "Put your hands on the back of the car," he ordered. "We've got a report of someone matching your description walking through the neighborhood carrying a weapon." Carrying a weapon? This was clearly a case of mistaken identity. I mean, I was the paper boy, just a hard-working regular Joe up at the crack of dawn delivering newspapers. I mean, the officer and I, we were practically on the same team. "But I'm the paper boy," I said. "Put your hands on the back of the police car." I put my hands on the back of the police car. And as the police officer began to pat me down, I was overcome with feelings of rage and fear and sheer terror. I had been accused of a crime I didn't commit, and it absolutely turned my stomach. And as I stood there, spread-eagled against the back of that squad car for what seemed like forever, I heard the squelch of the police radio and the dispatcher announcing the address of the scene of the alleged crime. It was Billy Amsterdam's house. And at that moment, it was as if a faucet had been turned on. As the tears began streaming down my face, I proceeded to tell the officer about all of Billy's taunts, all of Billy's menacing, and all of Billy's beatdowns. Moments later, I found myself surrounded by a fleet of police officers standing in the middle of Billy Amsterdam's kitchen. Billy's mother was there, dressed in a housecoat, her scowl firmly in place, and a rather penitent Billy standing behind her, still dressed in his Star Wars pajamas. "Mrs. Amsterdam," the officer said, "are you aware that your son has been tormenting the paperboy for months?" And as he relayed my tale to the officer, relayed my tale to the Mrs. Amsterdam, she grew redder and redder and redder while Billy began to turn a ghostly shade of white. "If this continues, Mrs. Amsterdam, we'll be coming back for your son." As I left the Amsterdam house that day, I could only begin to wonder what horrible, horrible fate awaited Billy. I do know this much: he never bothered me again. And after that episode, I decided to make a few changes to my paper route. I stopped delivering the paper to the Sunshine residents. The Amsterdam Sunday paper, let's say it was a little bit on the light side, and Mrs. Tricano's Sunday paper, it just overflowed with coupons. And a few weeks later, I was named Rockland Journal News Newspaper Carrier of the Week. I even got my picture in the paper. Thanks, everybody.